It's episode 144 of the Author Stories podcast. I'm your host, Hank Garner. Go to hankgarner.com and find all the archives of the show, and while you're there, click on the link in the right-hand sidebar and subscribe to the show. It really would help others find it as we get more and more people subscribed. I'd like to thank some sponsors this week. ThirdScribe.com is there to connect authors and readers in a really unique and tangible way. If you're a writer and you need help getting your work out to the world, ThirdScribe is there to help. If you're a reader and you want to connect with the authors you love, ThirdScribe is there to help. Go to ThirdScribe.com and let them know that you heard about it on Author Stories. I'd like to thank a new sponsor this week, August Ansel, and her new book, The Pretty Pox. A searing act of bioterrorism, a catastrophic plague they call the Pretty Pox. Most of the human race is dead, and for 2 years, Ari McInnes has been alone, writing out the aftermath of the Pretty Pox, waiting for her own inevitable end. Hidden in the attic of her ruined home, Ari survives by wit and skill, ritual and habit, convinced that humans are a dangerous fluke, a problematic species best allowed to expire. She chooses solitude, even in matters of life and death. In Book 1 of August Ansel's captivating new post-apocalyptic series, After the Pretty Pox, cast an unwavering eye on what it means to be human in a world where nature has the upper hand, and the only rules left to live by, for good or ill, are the ones written on our hearts. August Ansel is the pen name and alter ego of author Carla Baku. I cannot recommend this book enough. Please click on the link in the show notes and go pick up a copy of The Pretty Pox. Now on to our Writer's Workshop show. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, Writer's Workshop edition. Tonight, I'm glad to have two very good friends on the show with me. Michael Bunker, who is no stranger to the show, and Matt Herron. A lot of you may remember Matt on, I guess, has it been a year ago, Matt? Has it been that long since Scrivener Superpowers came out?
I think it was in February we last talked.
February. Well, that's almost a year now since we're about to roll over again. But yeah, Matt and I connected over our love of Scrivener, and he released a book and all about that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But Matt has also written a fantastic book called The Auriga Project, and that's what he's going to talk about today. And Michael is bringing his project, Hell in the Sea, to kind of deconstruct and talk about there. So two very different projects, two very different writers, but two guys who I respect very much, and we're going to dig into what they do. So Matt, why don't you begin by introducing yourself, and for maybe new listeners that have come on since you've been on the show past, and give us a little synopsis of the Auriga Project.
Sure. So I write under the name M.G. Herron, and the Auriga Project is a sci-fi thriller novel about a girl who gets translocated and her husband who tries to find her. And I also run a group in Austin. It started as a Meetup group, and now it's kind of an indie authors organization called the Indie Authors Society. And I also wrote that book on Scrivener that Hank mentioned we talked about in a previous episode. So now I'm focused on the sci-fi novels and the Indie Authors organization.
Awesome. So what is the Auriga Project about, if you could give us your elevator pitch?
Sure. So imagine high-tech translocator meets the ancient Mayans.
I love it. And that came out of a trip that you went on. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I went to Mexico and I saw the pyramid at Chichen Itza. Sometimes they call the pyramid El Castillo, and sometimes they just call it the pyramid at Chichen Itza. And so I went there and visited, and it was an amazing experience. And that kind of started the idea that became the Auriga Project. I don't want to say that it came out, fully formed in that moment, but eventually that's where it ended up.
Well, sure, and I know I have had story ideas that just come from the weirdest places, and then when I write it out, it may not have any tangible connection to that thing, but there's just something about that idea that just gets hatched and grows from there. So I love to. That's one of my favorite things about doing the show is kind of uncovering where those little kernels of story ideas come from, and then seeing how they come to maturity. It's so much fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Michael, your new project is called Hell in the Sea, and it's something that you're doing with a cool new platform, Patreon, and you're bringing. Not only are you doing a completely different kind of story than we've seen done really lately, but you're delivering it in a new and unique way. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm the story's Hell in the Sea, and I'm releasing it chapter by chapter, serialized, much like a lot of classic literature was released in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. So I release a chapter a month via the Patreon.com platform, which basically people can sign up for as little as $1 a month. I think the average is probably around $4 or $5. But for $1 a month, they get every chapter as it's released plus extras. So, for example, this month, Nick Cole and I re-released a book that we wrote that was originally called Texocalypse Now, and we re-released it as Tunnel Rats. And so that went out free to everybody on my Patreon. And then I usually put out a short story about every month as well that goes out free to them. So, it was a way to release an interesting new kind of different revitalized genre to my readers, and at the same time do it in a different way.
We hear when people start spouting marketing speak, and we've all heard plenty of it, but they talk about finding, and there's different words for it, but finding that core group of followers, fans. I don't really like any of those words, but you know what I mean. Those people that support what you do. Patreon really is giving you a tangible way to identify those people, communicate very quickly with them, and to really excite that crowd of folks that love what you do anyway.
Yeah, I think it serves two purposes. It actually gets people funneled into it from two different places. First of all, it's people who are excited about you as a writer, who would want pretty much anything that you're going to put out, and those people have access to materials long before anybody else is going to get it. The finished book, Hell in the Sea, may not be out till sometime next year, but they're getting a dose of it every month. And then there are people who may not even know you, who may not know. May not be considered super fans or anything like that, but they like the idea or the concept of both the project that you're doing and the way that it's being delivered. So I have a lot of people who are weren't even probably on my email list. They were not traditional, what we would call fans, who heard about the project either through a podcast or in some other way. And they thought, well, $1 a month and I get all of that. And it's an interesting topic and a interesting story. I'll go for it and see what it's like. And if you join for a month or 2 months and you don't like it, you just cancel. You're certainly not hurt.
Right. Well, like I asked Matt, give me the elevator pitch for what Hell in the Sea is about.
Well, Hell in the Sea is what's called a roman à clef, which is a true story that has been fictionalized, which is like most of the time when you watch a movie, it says based on a true story. It's based on a true story, but it's been fictionalized with fictional characters and such composition characters. But the story is about a indie writer who's found some success, and during the period that we've just gone through, which is the indie writer revolution, and a lot of the things that were going on at the time.
Gotcha. We're going to come back and we're going to dig into that topic a little bit in just a minute. There's several questions I have for you about what does it mean to be based on a true story and things like that. But Matt, you the Auriga Project you published was it earlier this year?
It was last
year,
September 2015, I think.
Gotcha. How long did you work on that book? You said the idea sort of hatched and grew from your trip to Mexico, but how long did it take before that idea was fully formed?
So it was the second book I started, but it was the first one I finished. So it took me 14 months, all told.
Gotcha. I know that Michael talked about releasing Hell in the Sea serially, and kind of, and I know Michael a little bit in a little bit of his process and how he sort of outlines, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but sort of in your head.
That's right.
You kind of hold the story there and kind of pull it out as you need it. But you're a Scrivener user, Matt. I know that. Tell me how using that tool in particular, and I think I know a little bit about your process as well, and how you're more of an on paper, air quotes, outliner. How do you structure your story and get it laid out before you start writing?
So usually so with the Auriga Project, it was a short story first. So I just kind of sat down and wrote, what was in my head there. But I quickly realized that the story was a little bit too big for the 3,000 words I was trying to cram it into. So at that point, once I have the idea at least down on paper, then I'll step back and use Scrivener's storyboard features to kind of flesh it out a little bit. You could do the same thing with note cards or, just in a bulleted list. Some people even like spreadsheets, God forbid, but whatever works. I just kind of take a step back and storyboard the whole thing and make sure it has a good, beginning, middle, and end. All the pieces are there. And that really helps me just to kind of see what's missing, see the holes that I can't really see in that first draft.
Yeah, when I first started using Scrivener, I just kind of barely stuck my toes in and just used basic features. Like I would create folders, and then I would give the folder a title that was just like a one sentence, just really a trigger for me to remember what I was thinking about happening in that situation. And that kind of became an outline
Right.
because I wouldn't consider myself a formal outliner. That kind of intimidates my distracted nature. But I've come to love the note cards and the storyboard, the corkboard feature. It really brings a visual aspect to writing. And I hear you talking, and you sound like you're a very visual writer, and laying those things out with the cards and being able to see that. Is that a big part of the process for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Scrivener has two advantages in that, one, you only need to use however much you want to use. So if you just wanted to use it like Microsoft Word and write everything in one text file, you can do that easily and still get the ebook out of it at the end. But the other way, the structured way that they allow you to use the note cards and separate things into files and folders, that really helps people who are highly visual like me. And at least the way I write in Scrivener, people think of outlining as like this separate task sometimes. And, sometimes I do write words that don't go in the story. But to me, building a story in Scrivener or outlining that way is almost like pre-writing. I don't think of it as a separate task. It's kind of like it all goes into the same thing. I wouldn't end up with the book unless I did that, structural planning, at least for me. Maybe some writers are different, but.
Yeah, I get it. One thing that first turned me on to Scrivener was the full screen editor mode. That you can set a photo as the background, and it's just like one sheet of paper on the screen. And that seems like such a simple, thing, but man, that made all the difference for me. Like there's all sorts of little features in there that, like you said, you don't have to use them all, but find the ones that you do like and use them.
Yeah, it's like a full suitcase. You just keep unpacking it, and there's more in there. And that's the amazing thing. Like I wrote that how-to book, and people come up to me all the time when I'll sometimes I do talks about Scrivener, teach people how to use these features, and afterwards there's always a handful of people that come up to me, and you can see their eyes are wide, and they're just like, oh my God, I didn't know that this could actually do this, and it's kind of changed the way I look at my manuscript or enabled me to see through it or get past a block, like that's why it's so powerful.
And that how-to book you referenced is called Scrivener Superpowers, and it like Scrivener, get it and reference it ever so often. Find a new feature.
Right.
Matt has a real awesome way of breaking it down and really putting the cookies on the bottom shelf, as we say. So yeah, pick up Scrivener Superpowers. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Michael, let's come back to this thing that you mentioned, a Roman au clef. What in the world does that word mean? That phrase mean?
I'm trying to remember exactly what it's basically. I know the clef part is with a key. It's a story with a key, and basically what it means is that it's a story where either the main characters or the locations or some major elements are fictionalized, although the story itself, the overall gist of the story, is true. And where it says a clef, which means with a key. means that usually either there are people alive who know who can identify who some of the main characters are, or it's obvious in and of itself what the key is that you use to unlock the truth of the story. And so it kind of came out of the whole Patreon concept. I had people probably for over a year, readers and other authors saying, hey, you might be the perfect kind of guy to use this Patreon to see how it works. And I was always against the idea. I wasn't that interested in it. And I thought, well, if the books sell, the books sell. And if not, then it doesn't. But I was actually reading.
That's because you're a Calvinist.
Right. That's right. If it happens, it happens. And so I was reading, also predestined to be reading. I was reading Hemingway's Movable Feast, which is basically the nonfiction explanation of what was going on at the time that he was writing The Sun Also Rises, which I was also reading at the same time. I've been reading it for 20 years. But anyways, in the book, there was a story of Hemingway and Ezra Pound, who were basically raising money every month. They had a program they started called Bel Esprit, and the goal of the program was to get T.S. Eliot out of the bank, and that's how they called it, getting him out of the bank. T.S. Eliot had taken a job as a bank clerk, and he didn't have time to write poetry, and they both thought that this was criminal, that this great poet was not writing poetry, and so they started a fund where other writers could subscribe and give money every month to get T.S. Eliot out of the bank. And so I started thinking about it, and I thought, this is a voluntary thing. It's things people are doing because they want the art. They feel like the world's being robbed of the art if it's not out there. And so since at the time I was reading A Movable Feast and Sun Also Rises, and The Sun Also Rises is a roman à clef about Hemingway and some friends who were there on the banks of the Seine in Paris in the 1920s, taking a trip to Spain to go to the bullfights. And that sounds like a very simplified literary story, but it changed literature. The book did. And so we had just come through, all of us have just come through a period from about 2008 or 9 until about a year ago, where there was a massive upheaval in publishing, and no one was really writing about it. And there had been some really important things that have happened during that time. So it all came together for me, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a roman à clef about publishing over through the indie revolution, and I'm going to use Patreon to do it. It just sounded like it was so meta, I had to do it.
Sort of like how, your book, that book you wrote in a feverish weekend, Hugh Howey Must Die.
Right.
Was it a little bit like
Almost
that,
exactly.
where it's a lot of tongue in cheek, but kind of burying things in there as you go?
Yeah, and I just felt like this is something. It almost seemed like it had to be. It almost seemed like it was something I needed to do because it all came together at the same time. And so I decided there was this real story, and I had put it off for a little while. I had the idea. And then I learned online that a guy that I had met online a couple of years ago, who was a indie writer, had committed suicide earlier this year, and that really kind of gave me the impetus, the kick that I needed to get going with the story.
Anytime that you're writing about a situation that has either just happened or is still happening, you're going to get a certain contingent of people that are not going to appreciate that, and will even say that you don't have any right to do that, or you're picking on certain people, or that you're airing other people's dirty laundry, et cetera, et cetera. How would you answer those sorts of criticisms?
Well, at some level, it's true. I mean, and I don't blame them for thinking that. And that's one of the great things about writing and about publishing in general, is what we're doing is we're offering a perspective. And it does, the perspective doesn't change if everybody that was involved is dead, and And the fact is that I expect people look at things from a different point of view, and people think differently about things. But in at the end of the day, it's something that happened, and it's an important. I think it's a very important part of our history. I mean, we've gone through the biggest revolution in publishing since the Gutenberg Bible, and I think that there are a lot of things that people think about that revolution, the publishing revolution, that fundamentally are probably not true. There was a lot more going on. And since most people weren't behind the curtain, they really don't know what those things are. Now, I understand that there are people that are going to get upset, but, this is literature. This is a type of literature that's been around for a long time. Thomas Wolfe wrote, and I've been reading the book lately, he wrote a book called Look Homeward, Angel, which was a classic. It was edited by Maxwell Perkins and published by Scriveners, and it's basically autobiographical. And everybody from his little town, I think it was Ashland, North Carolina, there was 200 identifiable people that were characters in the book who just had their names changed, and they were so upset that he had dared air their dirty laundry. And then he went on to write the second book, which was a continuation of it, and the same people were upset that he didn't include them. So the book had gotten so famous that there were people that were upset that they weren't included in the second book. So, there's nothing new. There's nothing new that's going on. This is an actual genre. It's a classic genre that's been around. Some of the greatest books in history are Roman Clef novels written during the life or during the time period of the events that happened. And I just think that there's a lot of either historical or literary ignorance that goes along with that as well.
Well, and I think like you, excuse me, my voice is trying to go out. I think like you referenced earlier, the clef is the important part. If you don't have the key, then it just seems like a story. But if you happen to be one of the people that holds the key, it's probably going to mean a lot more to them.
Yeah, and there's people that
one way or the other, good or bad.
Right. There are people that contact me every time a chapter goes out. They go, "Oh, I think this person is so and so," and a lot of times, it's actually a consolidated kind of character or a conglomerate character, or it's somebody that I actually did make up, because one of the things you can't do in this age, the way that we work, like Matt and I are friends, and we've met together in Austin and gone out for drinks and smoked cigars, but a lot of our communications actually take place through Facebook Messenger. And you could do it, but basically to have a book that was just a bunch of people talking through Facebook Messenger, it really wouldn't work. So what you do, because it's fiction, is that you create scenarios where people actually get to meet up, or you create a character who asks those questions, who would be near you, so that you can talk to them. And so, that's one of the things. And there are other people that read it. They don't know anybody that's involved. They don't know they just think it's a good story. And that's really what Roman Clef is all about.
Well, there's a whole genre, and I can't pull it out of the back of my foggy brain at the moment. That's journals. An entire book that comes through as the pages of a journal. You could do that with Facebook messages now, I guess.
Certainly, and it probably would work. I don't think you want to do that with every book, because it's a lot of way that
of course not.
It's a lot of the way that our communications happen now, are through texts.
Yeah, and I'm being completely facetious, but yeah, you're right. That's and I want to ask Matt about this, because Matt, you have done something really cool in your local community. You have built this writers community there, and like we're talking about with Michael, and how a lot of our communication now does come digitally. And I live in a very rural area. I probably know 2 other writers in my town, and they do nothing like I do. So me having a conversation with them is just kind of like, I don't know. It's we just don't really have anything in common. Although I can pop onto Facebook, and Michael and I can discuss something, or I can talk to Nick Cole about something, or Samuel Peralta, or any number of people, and I can get different perspectives on things, and and it's opened up a whole new world to a lot of us. But then you've taken that thing and brought it back down to the real world level, and kind of come full circle. Tell us about this this writers community that you built there in Austin.
I mean, you're right. The internet kind of breaks down those geographic boundaries. And
Yeah.
when you happen to live in a place like Austin that's so packed with, arts and music and writers, sometimes
Keep it weird, Austin.
Yeah, Austin has its own thing going on, but sometimes it's great because I set up the Indie Author Society through Meetup originally. The first meeting was set up through this website called Meetup. So anybody can create a meetup. There's no barrier to entry except a small fee, and I think they even have like a free version of their service. And you create a local event, and people can see it on the website and show up. So that's how we created the first one. And honestly, I was like, on Facebook messaging my friends saying, please come, because I thought nobody was going to be there. And I showed up and there was 30 writers I'd never met that were there. And I started this thing because I thought that I couldn't meet anybody that was into self-publishing or was writing indie books in Austin. And all of a sudden, because there's an official event for it on the internet, people showed up. So, I mean, it's a really amazing thing. You can use it to find people in your own area, or if you can't find something in your own area, you can start your own thing, and you never know who's going to come out of the woodwork.
That's so cool. What has this interaction with other writers done for you and your own personal writing growth, or in your maybe marketing, or just what do you feel like this group has contributed to you personally?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest benefit that I always tell people about, and it's not just for me but for everybody, is just to give somebody to give authors a like mind to talk to, right? To make sure that they know that they're not alone. The same thing that you would get out of any really close-knit writing community. It's just that the face-to-face interaction has a lot more value sometimes than online interactions. And I know people have found deep interactions online, but it's a little bit harder than in person. You have to try a little bit more. You have to put yourself out there more. But the face-to-face meetings, they really break down barriers and force people to, come out of their shell and talk to other authors. So that's a huge value. And I've found, I've heard of people who have come to the meetings who have found co-writing partners, people who have found marketing opportunities, people who have found editors and cover designers. So it's just like that networking aspect is huge.
Nice. And, writing is such a solitary pursuit that when you find someone like-minded and someone that you respect and can bounce ideas off of, or who will give you honest feedback, that really is invaluable. And we live in a great time for that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best part about a big group is that people make smaller groups out of it, right? So it's self-sustaining in a way. It's just like this great machine that you turned on that kind of keeps going on its own power.
Right. Matt, Michael was talking about it a few minutes ago, the genre of literature that he's writing in, and how we can take things that are real and couch it in slightly varied circumstances to kind of give us a palette to paint with. Although we're talking about things that are real, really, when we write fiction, most of us are talking about things that are real already. Maybe not as specifically and on the nose as Michael's talking about, but a lot of us and our circumstances and things like that come out in our fiction. When you were writing the Auriga Project, this is a fantastical sci-fi adventure. But are there any pieces of you and or people that you know, or circumstances that you've been in, that come out in your writing?
Oh, sure. I mean, apart from going to see the pyramids and using like that, the aspect of place and the setting of Chichen Itza in the book, even though, it was like located on another planet and nobody was really sure how they got there. The experience of being there definitely went into the book. And so, like, on a macro level, everything that I had experienced went into the book in terms of how the characters feel about the place and what they see while they're there. But also there are other things, like, I was raised Jewish, and so I put some fun Yiddish phrases in the mouth of one of my characters, who's kind of the comedic relief in some of the scenes. So that's always fun too. Like I never would have put that in there if I didn't grow up with it.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun. Do you do you find yourself as you're writing really sympathizing with characters, or do you imagine yourself being the characters as you're writing them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a aspect of the author in every character, right? And maybe it's like a certain lens of the truth there. Yeah, like whenever I tried to make my reality into fiction, I've always found it very difficult, right? The characters that are based on me as a person are just not that interesting in a story, because they're not the extreme version, So
Right.
I tried to do that. It didn't work. And so the truth that I ended up arriving at was that fiction is not truth as reality, but like the essence of it, right? It's all of your experiences distilled. So like when Michael was talking about how he's put the Facebook Messenger conversations into real scenes, a real scene has a lot more drama in it when the people are face to face, when you can see their body language and their expression. You just couldn't get all of that across in an online conversation. But you can put it into a scene and have the essence of the truth still there. It could still be the same conversation, but with a lot more drama.
Right. And I want to ask Michael about that in just a second, but you talked about using Chichen Itza in the book, but kind of moving it to another planet. Mm-hmm. How do you, as a writer, give this sort of idea of place that seems familiar, yet is in a completely foreign, alien, if you will, world, but that readers are familiar enough with it that they're willing to suspend disbelief and go along with you. So I guess the question I'm asking is, when you're like the books I write are in a very specific place, and I've in this town that has a lot of history and I have a lot of things to anchor to. Mm-hmm. But when you're writing a science fiction story on another world, how do you bring readers along so that they feel connected to that place, yet it's a place they'll never go?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really specific craft level, but I think it's all about the particulars, right? It's all about the details that make it. Like the temperatures in a tropical climate, the height of the pyramid, the type of stone, how long it's been there. Like, are the carvings faded or worn? And that really brings it to life for people. I was fortunate because, one, I got to go to Chichen Itza, and you can read about it and look at photos, but it's nothing like the photos when you're standing in front of this thing and it's just towering over you. So there's that as well. It's the experience of being there, and then also just like the really specific details about showing it instead of telling the reader how they feel about it.
I saw a documentary or long news segment, or I forget what it was now, about people that were compulsive liars, and they talked about the level of detail that people would put into these stories, and that when you reach a certain level of detail, people quit questioning what you're saying. They just go along because you just sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's very much like writing fiction.
Yeah, even if the details contradict each other, and this from writing fiction, that sometimes the contradictions are good. Because you know that people's perception is their perception, and sometimes they contradict themselves.
Yeah, and sometimes a contradiction opens up a whole new storyline. You just have to look for them.
Right, yeah, another level of complexity.
Right. Michael, on the same topic of place and translating that for the reader, a lot of the communication that you, a lot of the dialogue in the book happens in a bar or in at a con or different places like that, and you said that you've obviously had to translate some of the stuff out of Facebook Messenger or emails into a physical place. How important to you and ultimately to the reader do you think anchoring these situations into a place that can be tangible? How important do you think that is?
I think it was pretty important to this story. First of all, for the the historical aspect of it, and that is that the image of from the jazz age of writers sitting around in the cafe society, drinking and discussing creativity. So there was just kind of a hearkening back to that. But at the same time, it's true. The story actually starts at the Worldcon in San Antonio in 2013, which I went to. And a lot of the real things that happened there are in the story. And so, later on, one of the things I even mentioned this in probably chapter 5 or 6 is that it's a very self-aware story. And I'm not actually the main character. It's kind of a conglomerate character, but the narrator says, Hemingway had the benefit of jamming a bunch of relationships and a bunch of things into about 2 weeks in Sun Also Rises. If we're talking about something like the Indie Revolution that really took place and is taking place still, but it's taken place over 6 or 7 years, and I'm covering about 2 years in it, you have to do some of that manipulation of time and the element, because there's a lot of things that happen that are devastatingly interesting and painful or exciting. And then, as you know, as a writer, there's long weeks and months of nothing but writing. And
right.
And so, that's not going to be particularly really interesting. And so there's some creative license here to take conversations and people and turn those into something that's more relational. And so that's something that I did in the story. At the same time, much like Ernest Hemingway did, and Philip K. Dick, and Truman Capote, and people like that who have written Roman Clefs, you still are trying to portray the truth as more true than it might have someone might have seen it as if they were there. In other words, there's a lot of subtext, and there's a lot of things that are going on behind closed doors and emails and messages that a person just watching these events wouldn't know anything about. And what you can do is using these fictional elements, you can actually portray the truth more clearly. It's Hemingway said it can be more true if it's well written, and they can actually see what was really happening, because you can use things like foreshadowing and inference and things like that people may not pick up in real life.
You said that the main character is not you, but it's part of you, and an amalgam of several different people. Are the other characters in the book built the same way? Not specifically one character in whole, but a combination of different features and attitudes and things like that?
I think most of the characters are identifiable for people that know them or know the situations as that person and that character, and real situations. There's two characters who really are more amalgams of several different people, or different elements of me, perhaps. The main character is Dimitri Hardy. He's the narrator character, and he's very, very unlike me in a lot of ways. He's kind of back in the corner watching things, and is almost a blank slate when he's discussing things with people. He gives other people the opportunity to talk, which I really don't do that much. And at the same time, the character that everybody's kind of fallen in love with, which is bizarre because he was supposed to be this irritating comedic kind of character, is Fenton Cooper, who has become so popular in 8 chapters now that he actually, the fictional author Fenton Cooper, actually has written a short story for Forbes West's new re-release of Nighthawks at the Mission, and he's got his own novel coming out here in the next month. And so it's really become a favorite of everybody that's reading the story. And I get people like, when are we getting another Fenton Cooper rant? And so and that was a really a kind of a conglomerate character. It had a lot of Forbes West in it, a lot of me in it, and a few other people that I kind of threw together to create this almost comic relief character that's become very popular.
Is he kind of the embodiment of Dr. Midnight that we fell in love with last year?
He's very much Dr. Midnight. He's very much, the Forbes, the mysterious, mythical Forbes West. and then a couple of other characters as well.
Yeah, Dr. Midnight is very inside baseball, but if you go back and listen to several episodes, you can dig out some clues. So that's homework for anybody that wants to dig up Dr. Midnight. Let's talk some craft and strategy for just a minute, and we'll come back into more details in just a minute. But Matt, you write with Scrivener, and you are more of an outliner. Mm-hmm. How much preparation goes into your book before you write it?
That's hard to say. I guess sometimes none, sometimes up to 10%. If it's a short story, I don't feel the need to outline. I just sit down and write it. But novels are kind of intimidating, and doing a little bit out pre-writing, outlining, whatever you want to call it first, really helps take the edge off.
It kind of break that down. What is, you hear people like Brandon Sanderson has said that one of his Stormlight Archive books, he did 40,000 words of pre-writing.
Right.
That's almost a novel.
Yeah.
He could have put 2 more days work into it and had a novel out of it. But what does that mean? That you do pre-writing on the novel, or the preparation for writing it. I think some people that kind of goes over their head. What does that actually mean?
Sure. So I think the most tangible example of it is writing a journal in your character's voice, right? So say you're not sure what this character's voice sounds like. You think you want them to be the main character for a book. So instead of sitting down and starting to write the book itself, pick up an empty journal and sit down and journal as if you were the character. You might call it method acting, right? So an actor would pretend to be their character for several weeks before filming even starts. And a lot of method actors do this. It's the same thing, but for writers. So that's one aspect, one tactic of pre-writing. It's just getting yourself ready to tell the story, figuring out the particulars, first person, third person, is this the right main character, who's the villain, just figuring out all the details.
Gotcha. I think the first conversation I ever had with Nick Cole, when he was on the podcast back episode 3 or 4, whatever it was, he gave me a piece of advice that I have cherished from that day, and that was, he said that when he's revising his novel, or at the end of the writing, he reads it out loud and acts out all the parts.
Right.
And I took that piece of advice, and I'm telling you, it completely transformed my writing, especially dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't write it, and of course, written dialogue and actual conversation is very different, because conversation is very stilted, and we drop sentences and things like that. But you ought to be able to write dialogue that, when it is said aloud, makes sense and has a certain rhythm to it, and feels human. But I like what you said about kind of doing that on the front end to find out that character's voice. So writing those journals, I wrote that down on my notepad here, because that's something I'm going to use. And I can imagine even writing out those journals and then maybe reading them aloud to get a feeling for how this character, what their cadence is like, and maybe some of their quirks and idiosyncrasies and things like that. Mm-hmm. That's a great piece of advice. I'm gonna use that.
Awesome. Hey, you know how sometimes you write a book and you realize that 2 characters kind of have the same voice, and you need to differentiate them? That's another great thing to do ahead of time. You need to make sure that Fenton sounds different than Dimitri.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably why I usually have one psychopath in everything I write, just so I can have them be completely different. I don't know. Oh, that's great. Michael, you have a little different style. You kind of hold this story in your head and bring it out. When you begin a project like Hell in the Sea, and this is especially interesting to me because you're releasing it serially, so you're putting stuff out there to people before you have the rest of the book finished. Do you know where the conclusion of the story is already, or are you discovering it as you go, or is it some hybrid that's kind of sitting there between those?
In this particular book, every book's different to me, but in this particular book, I knew the whole story. I knew exactly where it was going. There was some, maybe a week or so where I was working through exactly how I would get the characters to where I wanted them at the end. But I pretty much had it all outlined in my head. And I'm not saying that in some kind of mystic way where I'm pretending like it comes out. I mean, I actually do. I actually do have a structure that I work through, and I think about each chapter then about how it's leading me to the hallmarks that I want to hit on the way through the story. Like I said, every story is different, and Matt's completely right. You do need to have characters that have different voices, that have different history, different experiences, and one way to do that is to make sure that or you write down, in his case, that these characters have lived a different life. For example, Fenton Cooper, I borrowed some of Forbes' real and mythical characters. So he's married to a Japanese woman, and he's got these Japanese connections, possibly Yakuza, and and then at the same time, he doesn't really do anything. You're like, what do you even do? I have no idea but he's able to go on trips and go to San Francisco and go places and spend money. And so there's that kind of background for that character where they live that type of life that's fundamentally different than the main character, who is living in an apartment in North Austin and on a budget and has to think about what he's going to go do or how he's going to get somewhere.
Gotcha. How does let's contrast Hell in the Sea with something like Brother Frank, big release that you had last year. Was that a book that you had the complete thing kind of worked out in your head before you started, or maybe that's not a good example because or Pennsylvania. Were either of those kind of discovery writing where you kind of work the story out as you wrote?
Pennsylvania was somewhat discovery writing, although I did, when I originally released it as a short story, the first short story, not knowing that I was ever going to write any more in the story. But I did have the idea that if I ever did write the story, where I would like it to go and what the big reveals were. With Brother Frank, I actually sat down and wrote out all the chapter, I guess you'd call them explanations. Pardon me. So I actually, and this is because I have an agent now who wants to see things and see what I'm doing and whether it's going to be interesting or whatever. And so I actually did write every chapter description out, what the action is in this story, all the way through the end of the book. And then as I wrote it, there was some surprisals where I thought of things, or I was constantly submitting it to Nick Cole, and he was like, "Oh, this has to happen." Or when I got done with the story, I sent the finished book to Nick, and he said the ending is wrong, and you have to change it. And then I had some other people read it, and that was what needed to happen. The ending needed to change, and so the whole ending of the book really changed from what would have been an inferior story. So, like I said, every book is, and I write a lot with other writers, and so I'm writing a project with Nick right now. I'm writing a project with Forbes, and I have an ongoing project I'm working with Kevin Summers, and everyone is different. And so, with those types of projects, you really have to do a lot of outlining, a lot of deciding, beforehand where things are going and how you're going to get there.
So what you're saying is every project is different, and you take on the tools that are needed for whatever project comes up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So takeaway is don't be too stuck in your methods of doing things. Let yourself be free to learn something new, to discover a new way to do something. I think we can all take something away from that.
That's right.
Matt, this group that you created, the indie author group there in Austin, of course it was brought together by this common thread of of indie authors and the revolution and people publishing on their own and taking the power back and all this great camaraderie that comes out of that. What do you see for the future of indie publishing? Do you think that it's coming into a maturity? Do you have any insight from connecting with all of these writers?
Well, that's a loaded question, Hank. Can I take a minute? No, I mean,
go ahead.
I don't know if I can make accurate predictions. I mean, every time I think something's going to happen in indie publishing, I've been wrong. But I think that the one trend that I do see is that more indies are starting houses. And I think that's the best thing that could have happened. People are going from self-publishing to indie publishing, right? Like, that's why we called it the Indie Author Society instead of the Self-Publisher Society. Because what happens is that people start doing the self-publishing thing, and then they realize at some point that it's actually a business that they have to run. And the successful ones sometimes, if it's their path, go on to create something bigger. And I think that, power in numbers, right?
Right. Michael, you're looking at indie publishing through a completely different set of glasses, and writing about it. What do you see for the future of what's happening, and is this thing maturing? Is it morphing? What's your sense?
I think it's really following a pattern that a lot of these type of sea changes in industry have happened. I think we've kind of saw a bubble in 2013, 2014, going into 2015 of really just a absolute overflow of people who had ever considered writing or thought about it as some type of money making thing, who may not have been completely ready to do it yet. And a lot of people rushed into it, and a lot of those people are kind of dropping out. I think that because of the success at that time, at the time of the revolution, the success of some different movie genres, that indie publishing became very heavy into a very unrealistic type of genre fiction that was really in a very narrow path. Saw a lot of young adult angsty teenager get superpowers or whatever, and I think that because of that, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's people that love that and they need to write that, but because of that, a lot of other areas of genres were completely ignored, like literary fiction and even combinations. And I think what we're going to see now, as it does mature, is we're going to see a widening of the type of materials that are available. The quality of the materials are going to get better, and I think at that point you end up with a normalization of the industry that we're going to eventually see.
Well, a similar thing happened with music, a while back, and
Exactly,
you see
yeah.
These things are cyclical. People talk about gold rushes and then busts and boom and bust and all of this stuff, and it's just cycles that happen over and over again. If you get far enough back away from it, you can see these things happening.
That's right.
But there was a great equalization that happened in the music industry. All the 70s and 80s kind of hedonism and pounds of cocaine and all of this stuff and Lamborghinis. Nobody's making those kind of deals anymore. But now musicians are having to do like every other artist and go out and find an audience, communicate directly with their audience, and and that's one thing that's fabulous about Patreon is you're connecting with the people that want to see what you're doing anyway, and I see a lot of that. There's a lot of reckoning happening, and a lot of artists are having to work for their supper again, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, and that's the way it's going to be. It's and it's good. I think we're going to end up with better literature out of it. And there's like Matt was mentioning, there's indies that are starting their own publishing houses. There are big time publishers that are determining that this is a really good way to find talent, and there are a lot of combinations of those things that are happening. And in the end, it's all going to be good.
Oh yeah, I completely concur. Michael, you posted on Facebook yesterday or the day before. You posted some music that you gave a recommendation, and it was some jazz that you listen to while you're writing, and it gets you in the mood. I would like for both of you to talk a little bit about some of those things that get you in the headspace to be creative. I listen to music. I have a stack of old records that I inherited from my grandparents and my dad, and I listen to a lot of old country music and all kinds of stuff. But there's certain things that I'll put on that get me in a certain headspace. What does it for you, Michael?
Well, I don't generally listen to music when I'm actually writing. I listen to it when I'm preparing to write. And in some things, like when I'm writing Hell in the Sea, I will listen to a lot of 20s hot jazz, Dixieland jazz sort of music, because that's kind of the epic or the area in which I'm writing. And anything really without words. One thing I cannot do if I'm either about to write or if I'm writing is listen to any music that has words in it, because I get so distracted. But other than that, I love to listen to jazz. I love to listen to soft type of ambient music. That does it for me.
You all softy, you.
I know. I can't help it.
I'm gonna let your secret out. What about you, Matt?
I feel the same way about music with lyrics. I can't do lyrics while I'm writing. But I do listen to a lot of instrumental music, especially upbeat stuff. So like if you've ever heard of Rat-a-tat or Mogwai, or there's one more suggestion for people, Checkerboard with a Q, so CHEQ. And all of those are great instrumental albums that you can spend hours and hours. And usually I'll just put one on repeat. So that's what I listen to while I'm writing. But in order to get in the mood, sometimes I think reading is the best thing for me.
That's right.
And I know Michael reads a lot too, and you need to take in the work before you can put it out. So I read a lot, and I listen to audiobooks at the gym. Just to, keep the well full.
Yeah, I do too. I listen to a ton of audiobooks, partially because I'm dyslexic and it's just easier. But there's nothing like hearing. I'm really big on the rhythm and the kind of cadence of words. Those things are super important to me. And there's nothing like just hearing how good dialogue sounds, and just how it tickles a certain spot in your brain, and when it's done well. And I don't think there's any replacing just, soaking up stuff so that you, can put out your own. One final question for both of you, and then I'm going to let you go. Both of you have written nonfiction and fiction. Is there any difference in your preparation for writing nonfiction or writing fiction?
Oh, for me, yeah, there's a tremendous difference. And that's not altogether true. If I'm writing something that's time travel, that's really, really research intensive, and then they're very much the same. But for some things that I write, it really doesn't take a tremendous amount of research, and so then I'm not. It's nowhere like nonfiction. Nonfiction takes a lot of research, a lot of checking things out, and making sure that you're getting things correct and you're not making mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a big difference in my process too. Usually when I write nonfiction, I'm either trying to learn something, and so the writing is teaching me what it is, and it was definitely that case with Scrivener. I was writing articles about Scrivener, blog posts that became the book eventually. Whereas with fiction, you're inventing something on the spot, so there's no like going and checking it out or researching. It's just me sitting there thinking.
Gotcha. Matt Herron and Michael Bunker, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Michael, where can they find everything that you do? Do you have a central hub where we can send people?
Yeah, michaelbunker.com. They can find everything there, and you can find my Patreon there. They can find my newsletter there, just pretty much everything. michaelbunker.com. All
right, we'll put a link there and to your Patreon campaign as well. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, my website is mgherron.com, and on Twitter at mgherron. You can chat me there.
Awesome. Michael and Matt, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to come on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, thanks, Hank.
You've been listening to the Author Stories podcast with Hank Garner. You can find all of the archives of the show over at hankgarner.com, When you're there, please subscribe to the show and leave a comment over on iTunes or Google Play. You can even subscribe at YouTube and Stitcher Radio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy what I do, podcasting or my writing, please check out my Patreon campaign. There's a link at hankgarner.com. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday and Friday for brand new episodes of the Author Stories podcast. Thanks for listening.